Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the special webinar today from Cougar Mountain. Today we're going to be talking about reducing your risk in your accounting system. Okay, welcome to the Denali Cougar Mountain webinar for reducing your risk today. Today we're going to be talking about ways to reduce your risk in accounting and also in transaction processing to help minimize the liability that you may be hit with in processing transactions in your system. My name is Jeremy Beislein. I'm your presenter today here at Cougar Mountain, and I will be running the webinar today. We're also going to have a representative from Avalara join us a little later on, and so when we get to that point, I'll introduce him as well. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and type those in the chat, and we will go ahead and answer those questions at the end of the webinar. We're going to try to keep everyone muted throughout the presentation because we're kind of short on time. We're going to try to wrap this up in about 30 to 45 minutes today. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to talk about Denali security and user rights. That's the first way to reduce your risk. And then we're going to talk about the new EMV credit debit card processing with the new EMV computer chip enabled credit and debit cards that are coming out. And that will help reduce your liability for any fraudulent activity. And then the third step we're going to talk about today is the Avalara sales tax processing, which will also minimize your tax mistakes, any kind of sales tax processing errors that may occur, which could result in tax penalties. And at that point, we will turn the presentation over to our representative from Avalara to take over on that once we get done with the Denali side. And once we're through with that, we'll wrap it up with questions and answers at the end and try to answer as many questions as possible. Any questions we don't get to, we will put those questions on the website with the answers for you. So. All right, so let's get started here today. The first one we're talking about is reducing your risk in Denali. Of course, the number one risk we all worry about in our business is the risk of fraud. So we want to reduce our risk of fraud by making sure that we set up our accounting to track everybody's actions that are going on. You know, most businesses have to deal with this issue eventually in the life of your business. We like to think we can trust all of the people that are working for us, but you do have those once in a while, those one-offs that come about where there's a situation that comes up you have to deal with. But the best way to stop the situation is to prevent it in the first place. And with Denali, there's security options available to you that helps you prevent the risk of fraud. So just a little excerpt here from our other trainer, Kevin. He's the one that designed our presentation outline today, Kevin Winston, so kudos to him. He has a few notes here, and I'll go ahead and read a couple of his notes. One of the things he says here is that every year in the U.S., businesses lose millions of dollars to fraudulent activity. Sometimes employees or partners are unknown to the business and uses experience and knowledge to extract funds. And a lot of times those transactions go unnoticed. However, once they do come out, then we have a situation we have to deal with. So the way we stop that is we set up certain security rights in Denali to prevent that to begin with. Denali has some great features to set up what users can and cannot do in the system, and that allows you to track exactly what's going on with your incoming and outgoings of your business. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about security rights first. I'm going to switch over to that here. So here we are looking at the Denali controller module, and it all happens right here under the Add Change User options here. So what you do is you set up your users that are going to be using the system, and you can assign a password to each user to secure that user and prevent other users from logging in under that user. And then you go and select what is it that this user can do. Specifically, do we have a user here that's in charge of accounts payable? They can set up vendors They can set up, they can have the right to copy vendors, all the different options you can do as the vendor setup. Then the transactions. Maybe this user is the accounts payable manager, so we'll give them rights to take care of all of the transaction tasks that are needed. But one of the great things about security in Denali is because we use an entry and posting system, a great option is to reduce the risk by not allowing your accounts payable clerk in this example to post the entries. Let the clerk do all the work, but at the end of the day, the accounts payable manager will review the work before posting so that they can make sure that all the bills being entered and paid are correct accordingly and they have come through correctly before actually posting. And that's the check and balances that Denali has in the user setup. So you have the workers, the different department clerks do all the work, and then you have the manager come in at the end of the day and just review that work, and then click the posting. It's a simple step, a seam button to post everything to make sure it all gets done correctly. And you can do the same with the pay bills. Now this is the actual writing of the checks. So the person signing the checks, maybe have them do the posting as they sign the checks to make sure they're correct. So just a couple of suggestions there. You can do that with accounts payable in the funding part of it. All of the modules has the same options there in the transactions section. So every module, every person that has the rights to all the modules, you can select specifically what rights they can and cannot do. And then, of course, General Ledger, this one is where you want to make sure that only certain users have rights to, because this is where everything is going to post to. So you want to make sure that certain users have rights to do what they need to, but your everyday users, everyday clerks, maybe do not give them the rights to make journal entries and make changes to your General Ledger. And we'll talk a little bit about the audit trail just in case those changes do get made anyway. Maybe you're a small business and you only have 1 or 2 employees, and so you don't have the resources to delegate different rights out to different users. And that's fine. Basically, you would just give your bookkeeper, the one bookkeeper you may have, rights to do everything except for the finalizing of everything. So you would just uncheck the posting on each of the modules to make sure that that user does not have the option to post, and so that you as the owner or manager can verify and review the work before the posting is done. And so by setting these rights, you can set your internal controls to keep track of everything that is going on in your accounting system. Okay, so that takes care of the user rights. The next thing we want to keep an eye on in Denali Security is our cash account, because your cash is your #1 flowing. It's the lifeblood of your business, of course. So what we do there is in the bank reconciliation, we have it set up real simple to make sure that our bank accounts are reconciled with the bank. We do that on a monthly basis. And then every time we check our bank, we can come in here on a daily basis to make sure that the current bank balance matches what our accounting records in General Ledger is showing us. So this is a double check to make sure that your check balance for each bank account is correct based on the accounts set up in BankRec and in General Ledger. Another great feature about setting up user rights is whoever is running the bank reconciliation, they may not have access to General Ledger. So that would be another way to guarantee that they cannot go in and make entries that are not authorized without changing General Ledger. And so if they do, you would see a difference in these 2 numbers here. It would be a quick way to do a simple check and balance to make sure that your current bank balance matches your General Ledger balance. You can run this as many times as you need. You just simply open the bank account maintenance screen in Bank Register in Bank Reconciliation, and it shows those numbers there for you. And then every month you would reconcile your bank statement to make sure that your cash accounts match what's at the bank. Okay, and then going forward, we have the Denali security check and balances that we have set up. Several other options that you have in Denali to make sure that everything is going through exactly right and that all of your users are working. Of course, a lot of these are done in general ledger. You want to review your profit and loss and balance sheet on a regular basis to make sure that everything is okay. For example, we may run our income statement and we may see something in there that looks a little bit unusual. So let's run that real quick. And we're going to run that just so that I can get some activity. My demo company doesn't have a lot of activity, so I'm going to run that for the whole year. So I'm going to run my income statement here, and it's going to show me a list of all of my income and expenses. Now this is just the simplified statement, so it's not going to be too detailed. But let's say I'm looking here and my, for example, my legal and accounting expense is a little bit off. I'm looking at that. As the owner of the business, I'm thinking that's a little bit high for my business. Now, of course, $15,000 really isn't for any business. Legal fees are expensive these days, but just for this example, we're going to use that number. Let's say that number looks a little high on my income statement. So how can I verify that number? Well, in Denali, you've got the drill down in the accounts payable under the expense distribution, and I can specifically select that account and look at the details of everything that went into that account for year to date up through the end of last period, last month. And that will show me the same number on my expense report, but it's going to show me the breakdown of that number. So here's the number, here's my total expense for my 6190 account, my legal and accounting expenses on my profit and loss statement. But as you can see, here is each transaction that went into that account for the year. And it even shows me the vendor that I paid. There's the vendor, there's my invoice number, my PO number, and my detail for each of those invoices. Now it just says line F and line K because we just typed that for the description on the detail. But you get the idea of how this works to where you can do the drill down of each account in general ledger to see where everything is going based on your expense distribution, and that gives us that number there. One of the many checks and balances you have in Denali that you can use here. All right. Okay, moving on with our demo here. So we've got the expense distribution. Another great thing that we have in Denali is a gap accounting system, and that in and of itself is a security feature. There are many accounting systems that when you make an entry in the system records that entry immediately, and the entry is recorded and posted, and it updates your financial statements. And then if there's ever an issue that you need to fix on that entry, you just simply open that entry from the history and change whatever needs to be changed. Now that might be easy and convenient, but that is not very secure, because anybody can go into your history and they can make any changes to any transaction, even your clerks that have the option to enter those transactions. If they go in and just make an entry and then go in and reopen that entry and make changes to that entry, it's going to change those numbers, and it's a way that somebody might be able to go in and do some cover-up and to hide things or change things that they shouldn't. But Denali is a gap counting system, which means that we do an entry and a post. There's a two-step process for every entry. We make all of our entries, and then we post those entries. Now we don't have to post each entry individually. We can do those on a batch system. So we can make all of our entries. We can have our clerks do the work for us like we were talking about earlier. And then we can post those entries after the work is done. So we go in and enter our transactions in our batch system. And if you wanted to set up the options to run a multi-batch system, you can do that in any of the modules, which allows you to work in multiple sessions at the same time. So now when I go in to enter my transactions, I can open a new batch here, enter my transactions in the system here. So I'm going to enter a check here to ABC Publishing. Make up an invoice there, PO number, miscellaneous, check number, and then my transaction dates, and then ABC Publishing would be advertising. $350. We're going to pay them $350 today and save. Now that check goes in, and I enter as many as I need to, as many invoices and checks, or in accounts receivable, as many customer payments, in sales, as many sales that I need to. Once I've entered everything, I can verify the accuracy of my work. This is what the manager does at the end of the day before posting. They run the edit report to show that all of the work that the clerk has done is correct, and this gives us a total of everything that we're about to post. Once we've verified the work is correct, now at the end of the day, we can finalize our entries. What's great about this is if we haven't posted anything yet, it hasn't affected our system. We don't have any changes to our chart of accounts and general ledger, our revenue and expense reports, our balance sheets, and so forth. But once we post, that entry now becomes final. So therefore, it cannot be undone, it cannot be changed, it is there to stay. And this right here shows us what we've just posted. We just posted a check to ABC Publishing in our system here. That has posted to the accounts payable, so that is there to stay. We also have a posting to the bank rec module with our integration. So we have our check number coming out of this bank account for $350. So bank rec got the posting, but that check is there to stay. And last but not least, we now have our general ledger posting, which is our audit trail, our income statement, and our balance sheet reports are now affected by this transaction. But as you can see, the information for each of these transactions, this is a single transaction. We credited the cash and bank account. It tells us on the audit trail the account that was affected, the description. It tells us the user that made the entry, the posting reference number, and all of the information about that. It even shows us who we wrote the check to, the invoice number, and the check number. All part of the general ledger posting, as you can see here. So all of the information is now recorded and set in stone. So now I know what you're thinking. What do we do if we make a mistake and we don't find that mistake till after posting? Well, the thing that's great about the GAAP accounting system is to correct an entry, we just reverse that entry. So now we go into ABC Publishing and we reverse that entry that we just made if we need to make a correction. Advertising. And now it's a reversal, which is a negative one. Get my fingers right there. So now, as you can see, this is going to show a negative amount that's going to post. And the reversal will go through and basically undo that entry on our financial statements. However, it doesn't get rid of the original posting. The system will show up in the audit trail when you run. If you run an audit trail report for any range, any date range, any account range, you can specifically see everything that has occurred during that time. So if we select today's date, so I can narrow it down to the specific day that I want to run it for. And this is going to show me everything I need to see that has posted. Now, if I had reversed that entry, you would also see a reversal of this entry here. Now, I didn't post the reversal, so it's not there. But you can see the original entry is there and who did it. Right here is my user ID that made the entry, and you would also see the reversal. All part of the secure audit trail in Denali. That way, nobody can hide anything. You know, mistakes do happen. We do need to make corrections after posting. But those corrections are recorded along with the original entries to show everything that has occurred right along the way so that nothing gets covered up. And these are some examples of different ways to run the audit trail. We can run the trail in single line. We can do all kinds of different things with that. Another thing that you want to keep track of is in the payroll module, you want to double check and make sure that your employees are recording their time correctly. So when you go through and you enter payroll, what's great about Denali is there's a system that you can double check that with by using the daily units that have been recorded on a daily basis. And it's just simply done by checking this box here. Now that system will basically use the units that were either imported from your time clock system or entered in on a daily basis that can be done individually. Now what's great about payroll is you can have the employees entering their time through the time clock or entering their time through the system here. You would enter the time on a daily basis or import it through the time clock. But then the payroll manager is going to be the one to run the payroll, and they're going to verify the total units that were imported from the time clock. But each employee does not have access to the total units that were imported, or to this entry system. So the employees can't make any themselves. Only the payroll manager that you give rights to can do that in the user rights. So there's another thing to just keep an eye on. And the only reason we mention that is because payroll fraud, time fraud they call it, is a concern. There's a lot of people that like to take advantage, work extra time where they're really not working or they're not there, they just don't clock out when they should, things like that. And Denali has extra security features in place to help you with that by using the time clock management system. One of the great features that you can add to the payroll system is we call T-Sheets. Basically what T-Sheets is it's an online time management system that can help with that. So you would want to contact your sales rep for more information on the T-Sheet system. That is a direct integration to the Denali payroll to track employees' time. All right, and then to sum it all up, Denali actually has a place in the controller where you can run what we call the red flag reports. And this is basically a collection of different reports to verify that the information being posted through to each module is correct. So in your main controller module, that's going to be listed under the reports menu, and there's the red flag reports. Each of these reports are available in the other modules here, like the control report from accounts payable, the expense distribution report. That's the report that I showed the example earlier. That's from accounts payable, but you can run it directly here if needed. So all of your monthly reconciliation reports you can run right here from the controller. So it's a nice, neat list of reports that you run on a monthly basis to make sure that everything that you are running, everything that is posting to your system is correct. Now we do have additional examples and webinars on running those monthly reports, so you would want to review those webinars. They are recorded up on the website for your monthly checks and balances. All right, well that wraps up the Denali security section of our presentation today. So the next section we're going to talk about is something that everybody is concerned about these days, especially if you're a retailer, and that is the EMV credit debit card processing. Basically what that is a system that the new credit debit card system, where you'll probably notice a lot of the newer cards coming out, they have the back up one here. They have the little chip in them, the little computer chip in your credit card. And that chip basically is an extra security feature that allows the retailer to verify the transaction using their merchant provider here. So when you run that credit card transaction, if you use the chip entry rather than just swiping the magnetic strip, then that will give you additional protection against being liable if that transaction is a fraudulent transaction. And basically what it is if the customer is present and swipes their card with the magnetic strip, and that card has the computer chip, then the merchant or you become liable if the customer ends up disputing that charge. On the other hand, if you have a system set up where the customer can insert their card and you read the computer chip instead of the magnetic strip, then the card issuer will be held liable if the dispute goes through, rather than the merchant. So that takes the liability away from you by using the credit card processing with the magnetic or with the computer strip, the computer chip. And with Denali, we've actually partnered with Cayenne, who is a merchant service provider, to provide that service for Denali users that have our sales module. So if you are using the Denali sales module and you do credit card processing, then Cayenne has come up with a really neat device called the Genius device, and that is basically your little credit card machine, the little box that you use to run credit card transactions. Now the Genius device does have the magnetic strip reader, but it also has the computer chip reader, so you are fully compliant with all EMV requirements, relieving you from that liability if the charge is ever disputed for any reason. So basically you would just set that up in your sales module under the preferences. You would just set up the Genius device here in Denali by selecting the 4.0 Genius. And that opens the way for Denali to directly communicate with that device. When you process a credit card transaction, the system will read that credit card, make sure that the charge is authorized based on the computer chip entry, and go ahead and process that sale through for you automatically, and it's fully integrated into Denali. So we definitely recommend setting up the Genius device if you accept credit cards in person, if you're like a storefront, a retailer, to get that system set up if you don't have that already. And you will be fully compliant with that. All right, so the third step that we're going to talk about today to reducing risk is reducing your risk of tax penalties in your sales tax processing. Again, this is specifically to retailers and people who sell items where they have to charge sales tax to their customers. The issue we have today is the sales tax system here in America has become so complex and so confusing, not just per state, but even within states and within localities. There may be different sales tax rates, and it could not only depend on where you're at or who you're selling to, but also what you're selling, the specific item you're selling. So what we've done in Denali is we have partnered with Avalara to help us with that. Avalara, they've come up with the AvaTax sales tax processing system. That's a great system to automatically calculate the sales tax at the time of sale. And the sales tax is specifically calculated based on where the sale is, who the customer is, and the item you're selling to the customer. So all three of those things come into play in the Avalara system to calculate that sales tax, and it happens on the fly in your sales. So when you're running your sales in Denali, let's go ahead and open up a sale here. Now before you run the sale, of course, you have to set up the Avalara tax system using the system here to set that up. Let's see, options. Check the box here for just a moment, and then you fill in your numbers that specifically refer to your business. Now these numbers you would have to basically sign up for Avalara, get their service, and we're going to have a representative come on and give you more information on that in just a moment here. But once you have that all set up, then running your sales tax is real simple in Denali. You don't have to worry about what the rates are. You don't have to worry about who gets charged what. You come in here, and when you sell an item, the system automatically calculates the tax. And as you can see down here, the tax says not yet calculated. Might be kind of hard to see that, but that's what it shows on the screen. Not yet calculated until we finalize the sale. Now when we click tender to finalize that sale, then the system automatically pops in the tax calculation from Avalara. Now you probably saw that little error pop up. The reason that error popped up is because this right here is another feature Denali has, that if for some reason your internet connection is down, the connection to the AvaTax system fails, then you can set up a backup tax code that will just calculate the tax on the fly for you temporarily until your internet comes back up, and at the time of posting this sale, the correct calculation will go through. That way the calculation is done correctly, and you won't be held liable for any additional penalties or fees for not charging the correct sales tax. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Avalara. We're going to have a representative from Avalara come on. His name is Christian. He's going to take over here in just a moment. There you go. And he's going to basically be the one to give you more information on the Avalara system. Basically, what happens outside of Denali. So once the sales tax goes through. So, all right, Christian, go ahead. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? I'm going to assume that you can.
Can anybody else
good.
hear him?
Okay. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the webinar today and hopefully shed some light on ways to reduce your business risk when it comes to sales tax. As you said, my name is Christian Shaw. I am a regional sales manager here at Avalara. My team specifically focuses on the small to medium-sized business, and we talk to business owners each and every day with very different sales tax scenarios. They may be in just one single state, or they may be selling across the U.S. or even globally. We have a wide range of solutions that can help. Avalara has been around for about 10 years. And in that time, we have become the industry leader in cloud-based sales tax compliance. We're based here in Seattle, and it's currently raining sideways. So I guess given the time of year, that is to be expected. So let me jump in here, and I've got a few slides that can talk to sales tax and some of the risk associated with it. So this slide here is kind of a broad overview. We're just talking about sales tax as a whole. If your company has nexus in a state or jurisdiction, then you are required to collect and remit sales tax in that specific state. If you aren't familiar with the term nexus, this is broadly defined as a substantial physical presence within a specific state or jurisdiction. Many things can trigger nexus, but some of the more common ways you can trigger this is having traveling sales reps going to visit clients in other states or jurisdictions, possibly storing inventory in different locations, or even just going and visiting out-of-state clients to perform service calls or installations or deliveries. This is going to be treated differently by different states, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a lot of gray areas when it comes to how you're triggering nexus, but our stance here at Avalara is if you're on the fence as to whether or not you have nexus in a given state or jurisdiction, most of the time it's better to concede nexus, get registered, get set up with that state so you don't have a balloon of potential fines and debt following you around. Within the U.S., as Jeremy said, this is a difficult thing to manage. There's over 11,000 distinct and separate taxing jurisdictions within the U.S. There's different rates associated within those jurisdictions. There's different product and service taxability. And this isn't static, right? It's changing all the time. We have a content team here at Avalara. Their sole job is to keep our tax engine up to date with all the changes that come along with products or services or jurisdictional breakdown. So our tax engine is always kept up to date. Some of the other things associated with sales and use tax, you have exceptions. Some products and services will be taxable in some states or jurisdictions and will not be in other states. Software as a service, as an example, if it's sold in Texas, that is an 80% taxable product. So you take your sales tax rate, whatever it may be, and you would collect 80% of whatever that is for software as a service. In New York, as another example, clothing is taxed if it is over $110, but if it is under $110, it is not taxed. So it's difficult to manage this from a manual basis. You're also going to have customer-based exemptions if somebody is going to resell your item or is manufacturing with your item. They might be providing you an exemption certificate. You should be managing that correctly. And I think I touched on the taxability exemptions. So some of the key things that are a part of each invoice that our tax engine looks at, the who, the when, the where, and the what, All of these items are important when trying to determine how much sales tax needs to be collected or if sales tax needs to be collected. So we have a direct integration with Denali now. We can take a look at the who, the when, the where, and the what, determine if sales tax does need to be calculated, and if it does, how much needs to be calculated. All right, so let me move on to the next slide here. So here's some challenges that come along with sales tax. This is not something that is optional. The states want you to do this. If you have Nexus there and are currently registered there, you have to do this. If you haven't experienced an audit, I hope you never do. They're not fun, but they often result in back taxes and penalties. Manually doing this is a difficult thing to do. You know, you have to have the appropriate staff trained. You have to make sure that you have the appropriate education for this staff. They have to know exactly what it is they're doing, when to charge sales tax, when not to charge sales tax, doing the research on what the rate is, and constantly doing that over and over, because this is not a static environment. In 2014, there were close to 14,000 rule changes within the U.S. So keeping track of that manually, if you're doing business in just one state, just with that one state, or if you're doing business in more than one state, it gets even more complicated, right? And finally, this is 100% non-revenue generating activity. You don't make any money doing this. You can only potentially lose money if you're not doing this correctly. Avalara, again, has partnered with Denali to help automate this, and rather than trying to do this manually, we can make this a very streamlined process. Oh, I skipped a slide here. I'll go back. Okay, so some of the key risks associated with doing sales tax. You need to make sure you know what your Nexus footprint is. If you have a business in a certain state, that's where your headquarters are. Obviously, you have Nexus in that state. I'm sure most of you are registered to collect and remit in that state. But if, like I covered before, if you're doing any sort of Nexus generating activity in other states, you should be registered there, you should be collecting, and you should be remitting in those states. Handling your exemption certificates, this is a difficult task for many. It's kind of low-hanging fruit for an auditor. If an auditor comes in and sees invoices that you are in a state where you should be collecting tax and you're not, and you say it's because you're collecting exemption certificates, they're going to want to see those exemption certificates. They're going to want to see that they are valid, that they have not expired. That's something that can be challenging depending on the number of certificates you have and the states where you're collecting them. Some states are going to have these expire every year. Some states, they never expire, but you need to know exactly how you're handling that. Sourcing is a difficult thing as well. Depending on what state you are based in or what state you have Nexus in, your state may say that you are an origin-based state where the sales tax is determined from where the product or service is delivered from. A lot of other states are destination-based, where it's based off of where you're delivering that product, where the goods change hands. And then there are a few states that are a mixed sourcing. The state and the county will be assessed at the origin. The city and the special, if applicable, will be based off of the destination. So you want to make sure that you know exactly the states that you're dealing in, how they're handling the sourcing rules. And I think I touched on this a little bit before, but the rules around the taxability of products and services, this varies greatly from state to state. I'm going to show you a sample invoice in just a minute that has some varying taxability as well. So I think, Jeremy, if you could pass me controls, I will show my screen here.
All right. Sounds good. I'll get that sent right over here to you, Christian. Make presenter. There you go.
All right.
Okay, take it away.
You see my screen? Okay, so this is our tax engine. This is the AvaTax portal. When you sign up with Avalara, you'll be given your own account login. This will show you service notices or account alerts, a summary of your tax. We'll also have a help center down here where you can learn more about sales and use tax and access to support during normal business hours. So I'm going to come across here to our transactions tab. I have a number of different demos companies in here, but I'm going to go to a specific invoice that I created today. So this is an invoice that could have been passed from Denali, and it shows our origin, it shows our destination, it shows some other information collected from the invoice, and then it shows our line items. So we have 4 line items on this particular invoice. This is an origin of Bainbridge Island, Washington, where our headquarters is here, close to Seattle. And then it shows a destination of Half Moon Bay, California. We have a total amount of $1,900 that's going to be collected. And from that, we have $1,250 that is non-taxable, $118.75 that is being collected. Now I can expand this, and you can see how this is broken down. So for line item 1, we have computer hardware. This is mapped to our tax code for tangible personal property. The line amount of $1,000, fully taxable, and then you can see it breaks down each of the taxing jurisdictions associated with this address in Half Moon Bay, California. So you have your state, you have your county, you have your city, and then you have your special. Moving to the second line item, this is installation and mapped to our tax code for installation. $250, all $250 is non-taxable in California. Third line item is software maintenance contract, line amount of $500. It is a 50% taxable item in California. So the tax engine knows this. It appropriately collects tax on just $250 of $23.75. And finally, freight of $150, which is fully non-taxable in California if you are not marking it up. So all of that information is then stored in the cloud. All of your invoices that are requiring sales tax calculation are stored in our cloud, and they will translate over to our sales tax returns tab. So I'm going to pull up a month with some data. Bear with me here. So this demo account has Nexus in quite a few places, which makes it a very challenging tax scenario. But I'm just going to open up our California tab here. This particular client has a monthly prepayment and a quarterly return. You can see here it's calculating your monthly sales, your total taxable sales, and the total liability that is being generated for that period. It'll show you exactly what needs to be remitted. You simply move this from select to approve for the given state, and then at the bottom of the page there's a total amount that you will designate an account that we will make a 1 withdrawal from at the end of each month or quarter, depending on your filing schedule, and we will fill out and file and remit each individual tax return to each state or jurisdiction as needed. Do we have any questions that have come up during my presentation that I want to cover at this point, Jeremy?
No, it looks good for now from what I can see. I haven't seen any pop into the chat yet, so I think we're good.
All right, so why don't we just go back to the deck then. Let me change presenter here to you.
All right, show my screen, and I'm still going to let you keep control here, so just one sec. There you go. Take it away.
Great. So let's just finish up. So here's a few ways to reduce risk when it comes to sales and use tax. You know, I think the most important thing here is to know your nexus. Know exactly where you are obligated to collect and remit. Know where you may have, maybe you're on the fence on a few states. Know what your liability is there. If you don't get registered, you know, what's the risk associated with that? Doing a very careful analysis of that is important. The second thing here is, you know, how does your accounting system handle sales tax? You know, luckily, Denali has entered into a partnership with Avalara, so we can automate this for you. But if you're not automating, how are you handling this? Are you basing it off zip codes? Are you basing it off just counties? You want to make sure that your staff knows exactly how and when to collect sales tax for all of your sales. third step here, you want to evaluate the costs and the risks associated with doing sales tax. This includes staffing, training, doing research, and potential fines too. I mean, doing this manually is difficult. Each business is going to have a different kind of scenario, but even the most basic of scenario is difficult to do because things change all the time. So you want to make sure you're objectively evaluating those costs. And then you want to make sure that you evaluate solutions. If this is something that you don't want to handle manually, as it is, again, a 100% non-revenue generating activity, there's probably better things you can be doing with your time. What are the solutions out there? From our standpoint, an integration with your accounting platform is ideal. This is the only way that you're going to get a real-time tax calculation. So if you do an invoice on January 30th, and then you do the exact same invoice on February 1st, that can change. If a county or a special or even a state redraws a jurisdiction, changes taxability, or changes a rate, you'll need to be doing that research constantly if you're doing this on a manual basis. If you automate it, we keep all that information in the cloud and it's constantly being updated. Finally, you want to make sure that you have buy-in from all of your team members. They should know exactly what your compliance strategy is and make sure everybody is on the same page. If you have a number of different departments that are doing things differently, that can lead to quite a big audit risk going forward. So you want to make sure everybody's on the same page with how you're handling this. So Avalara mostly does our main product and service is to help people automate their sales and use tax, but we do a number of different things as well. We can help you with your 1099 compliance. We integrate into shopping carts, and we have professional services that will help people with Nexus studies and quite a bit more. So that concludes my presentation. If I can answer any questions now or later, I would be happy to do that. So Jeremy, I will pass it back over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Christian. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Sounds good. So yeah, the big thing about Avalara that's great with Denali users is the fact that it is fully automated. You basically just set up your Avalara settings in the Denali system like I was showing you, and then the Avalara system takes over from there, from the tax calculation all the way to the tax filing and payment, clear to the end. So that's the great thing about it. So it's definitely a great way to reduce your risk for any sales tax mishaps in your organization. All right, so yeah, that basically buttons up the presentation for my end as well. That basically takes care of it for reducing your risk. We have several other webinars that we have already done to get into more details, specifics about how we take care of our monthly checks and balances. So be sure you check that out when you're going through on the website here. You can also see a list of the upcoming webinars we have. Be sure to check out next month's webinar where we're going to talk about processing your W-2s for your employees. So make sure we check that out. And so let me just double check real quick and see if I have anybody that has put in any questions so far. Okay, a question from George. He's asking about how the products that we talked about, such as Cayenne, I imagine, and Avalara, works with Cougar Mountain Professional. Right now, we do not have the Cougar Mountain Professional integration with Avalara because the Professional is our older line that we are no longer developing. We're still supporting it for some of our pro users, but we're now focusing on the Denali line. So another question from George. Does Cayenne handle Apple Pay and PayPal, etc.? At this time, it doesn't handle Apple Pay or PayPal. It just handles the computer chips on the cards, but that is a feature that Cayenne is working on to get that added. All right, another question from George. Ship to, what if that is inside the state, but the bill to is outside the state? That is a good question. Christian, do you have any insight on that?
I can touch on that. Generally, the sales tax, if you're using the destination address, is going to be where the goods and services change hands. So it's going to be, you could have a bill to in the same state, but if you're delivering out of state, generally the address of the ship to is what's going to be used to determine what the sales tax needs to be collected.
All right. Yeah, great options there. So it's typically where the product is going.
Yeah, where the goods and services change hands.
All right, perfect. Okay, and another question from from George. Taxability on freight and shipping, that's automatically calculated, I know, with the Avalara system. Some states don't require sales tax on shipping charges, and the Avalara system will take care of that for you. Does Avalara do anything, good question there from George, does Avalara do anything about use tax, where you have to calculate a use tax? Do you know anything about that, Christian?
Yeah, we can help with use tax remittance. Most of the time, you aren't doing your purchases through one specific system, so you would need to keep track of what it is that you're purchasing that you need to self-assess use tax on. We do have a sales tax calculator on our website, so if you don't have sales tax that's being collected on a given invoice, you can figure out how much it is that you need to be self-assessing, and then we can help you remit that to the state.
All right, great, sounds good. Okay, and just a couple more questions real quick. How long does it take to implement? On the Denali side, it's just a matter of putting in your settings based on what Avalara has given you for your account number and account ID, your key. But what about that, Christian? Any insight on that?
Yeah, it varies from client to client depending on how many products and services you have, but we always have a get started call with one of our implementation specialists, and it ranges. Sometimes people can be up in an hour or so, and at the longest I would say 8 to 10 hours of getting your different product and service items within the website and tax engine, but it's a pretty easy process.
All right. Great. And what about if you're dealing in multiple jurisdictions where some jurisdictions are monthly filings and others are quarterly filings? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so the tax engine understands that. You will set up your tax return calendar with your Go Live specialist when you sign up. So if you're filing quarterly, the sales tax will be accruing through that specific quarter. At the end of the quarter, we'll remit for you. Other states, you may be on a monthly filing schedule, so we can handle that with no problem.
Awesome. All right. Okay, and this is a final question that George is asking about. How do you handle deposits on bottle or can sales? I don't know if that's a tax issue or not, so that would just be like an additional fee added to the item in the Denali inventory implementation there. So yeah, that would definitely be something we could do as part of the setup of the item in inventory. We'd add such as a miscellaneous charge or a non-inventory charge for that deposit amount that would be coded to perhaps a liability account that you would pay that to where it needs to go when the customer returns that item. All right, well, that's all of our questions. Christian, I want to thank you for helping us today with this presentation. It's been great information, so thank you very much for your assistance today.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you everyone else for showing up today. Be sure to check out our website for the upcoming webinars. Also, you'll see a recorded copy of this webinar on the website as well with your questions and answers there as well. And if you have any questions, any other questions, contact your Cougar Mountain support representative at the number there on the screen. That's just our Cougar Mountain sales line. You can also send them an email. And with that, thank you so much. Keep an eye out for follow-up communications on the website and also for access to this recording. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.